I love being at HarborPointe. It's one of my favorite churches. I don't get to be here much, but when I am here, I always just love the vibe. I love the feel of this church, and just what God does in this place, and so that's exciting. Good stuff. So anyway, I'm going to start today. I'm going to talk about football. Even if you're not a football fan, I hope you'll be able to appreciate the story I'm going to tell, because what we're going to really be talking about is being faithful with the little, faithful with what God has given you. Now, how many people here are football fans, just to gauge the audience? Okay. Oh, well, a little bit more than the first service. That first service is a very spiritual bunch, and they're not into stuff like that, so I'm glad to be among my people in this service, you know. So anyway, yeah, so the big game the other day, you know, every kid grows up wanting, you know, every kid that ever holds a football, no matter how much air is in it, and no matter, you know, it's like it started. Every kid that ever holds a football grows up, you know, he imagines himself in the Super Bowl. You know, one day I'm going to be the quarterback, or I'm going to be the receiver. I'm going to be the guy that wins the game for my team. And so every kid that plays the game, he goes through all the hard work and everything it takes, and the pain and the injury and all that, because one day he wants to be in the big game. Well, I want to talk to you about two guys that actually were in the game the other day. The first one is Chris Matthews. Now, one thing you need to know about football in the professional way is there's only a couple of ways you get to be on a professional football team. The first is the draft. If you're really one of the good players, they get together and you get chosen by a team. We want you to be on our team. We want to sign a contract with you, and that's the best way. I mean, if you get to the draft, you've pretty much made it. You know, those are the players that probably are going to be on the roster once the team gets it settled out. Now, after the draft, they will pick up other players, and they will invite people, hey, you can come try out for our team, but it's not quite as easy, and you know, not many of those guys actually make the team. So that you kind of got to know that to help kind of appreciate the story. So we have this guy, Chris Matthews. He's one of those guys, came out of college, did pretty good in college, but he wasn't drafted. He sat there, like I'm sure everybody else did, all day during the draft, waiting to hear if his name was going to be called, and it wasn't. And after that, though, this a couple years ago, he was signed by the Cleveland Browns to try it out. You know, we'll let you give it a try, and then they cut him. You know, so he didn't make the Cleveland Browns. He didn't get his chance to play in the NFL, and ended up playing for Winnipeg in the Canadian Football League, which for football players is not exactly on the road to the Super Bowl. It's kind of a detour. It's kind of going in another direction. For any Canadians here, by the way, today? I'm not worried, because Canadians are nice people. You know, they're so nice. They'll say, "We're sorry we're Canadian." You know, so. But seriously, you know, Canada's got some great stuff. Football ain't one of them. You know, but anyway, he made it onto this Canadian team, and he made the most of it. He did a great job. He got most outstanding rookie in his first year, and then the second year he got injured and he got cut. So he's fired again. He's released by the team, and he ends up working at a Foot Locker. Now, there's nothing wrong with working at a Foot Locker, unless you're a professional football player wanting to be on a professional football team. It's probably pretty embarrassing to be wearing the goofy, you know, referee outfits and helping other people get their shoes so they can be playing football. But that's where he found himself. He could have given up. He could have just said, that's it for football. But while he was working there, he got a phone call from the Seattle Seahawks. Hey, we'd like you to come try out for our team. So his hopes are, he had to actually ask off. He had to ask his boss at the Foot Locker, can I get tonight off because the Seattle Seahawks, last year's Super Bowl champs, want me to try out for their team? And so he does. And so February 18th last year, a little over a year ago, he signed with the Seahawks, a little less than a year ago, signed with the Seahawks for a chance to make their team. So he got to play in the preseason. That's pretty special. You know, the preseason games, you know, he got to play, caught some passes, did okay. And then on August 30th, they fired him. Then the next day, they called him back up and said, okay, look, you know, we kind of like you. We want to put you on our practice squad. Now, again, if your goal is the Super Bowl, practice squad is not exactly, it's better than not being, you get paid, you're on the team-ish, but you're the guys that they practice against, so your team during the week, you're pretending you're the other team that they're going to be playing this week, and so you're just the tackling dummies. And so he makes that practice team, and he hangs in there. He makes the most of it. He works hard. He does everything he's supposed to do. And then sure enough, late in the season, come December, there have been several injuries, and they need to pull up a receiver. They say, well, let's pull Chris up. He's been working hard on the practice team. So on December 6th, he gets pulled up. He gets to play in the last 3 games of the regular season and does absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing. He doesn't catch a pass. He kind of got 1 tackle. That was about it. And then comes the NFC game, the championship game against Green Bay. Exciting game. Green Bay is winning all along. Then the Seahawks come back, and it's right towards the end, and the Seahawks decide to do an onside kick. If you know football, that's, instead of kicking the ball off way to the guy and the other, you kick it just 10 yards, and then you try to jump on it before they get it. And he's the guy that gets the onside kick. He's like the hero of that game. And they end up going on to win the game in overtime, and things are starting to come up for him. Then in the Super Bowl, since he's doing better, they put him in the Super Bowl game. His first pass that he receives as an NFL player is in the Super Bowl. I mean, how crazy is that? He had never caught a pass in an NFL game. His first pass, and it was a good one. It was like 44 yards. They went on to get a touchdown after that. A little bit later, they throw it to him again, 11 yards. He gets the touchdown. He scores a touchdown in his first football game ever, and it happens to be the Super Bowl. So it's just craziness. And it was such a great story if we were going to say, and he won the game for him, but he didn't. Because at halftime, the other coach said, we're going to have to stop this guy. He is hot. He's getting all the passes. He's the guy to stop. So they say, who can we pull up? And they pull up some guy that pretty much nobody had heard of. So while Katie's out there dancing with the Sharks, the coach is back there saying, who is it? Who can we get to, and so they call up Malcolm Butler. Now, let me tell you Malcolm's story. I'm going to go back a little bit further for him. In 2009, he didn't get good enough grades to really get into a full-time college. He gets into Hines Community College, and they have a football team. And he'd played a couple years in high school. He was okay. And he does real well that freshman year. He gets a bunch of tackles. In the first 5 games, he's got like 22 tackles, an interception. And then after the 5th game, he gets kicked off the team. And rumor has it was probably drug-related. So he gets kicked off the team, and he quits school, and he ends up working at Popeye's Chicken. Now again, there is nothing wrong with working at Popeye's. Wait, Popeye's Chicken? I don't know. Just got to ask, So there's nothing wrong with working at Popeye's Chicken unless you're a football player in your hometown, and all your friends come in and go, hey, what are you doing working at Popeye's? I thought you were going to be the football star, So this is what he's having to deal with. He realized, I got to get my life together. He straightens his life out. He gets on his feet. And then the community college calls him back a year later and invites him to play. He has a great season. He transfers to West Alabama, which, isn't exactly Alabama, but it's a Division II team. It's a good Division II team, and has a great career there. I mean, really does a great job. Gets some awards. Lots of tackles, lots of stuff, lots of interceptions. And then comes the draft, the NFL draft. And he doesn't get drafted. Just like the other guy, just like Chris. He doesn't get drafted. No one picks him, no one calls. And here he is going, what do I do now? Is it, back to Popeyes? What's next? But it turns out his coach knew one of the coaches for Seattle, and Seattle was looking for a particular type of player. So the Seattle coach and his coach get talking, and his coach says, you really ought to give him a try, because he's a hard worker, he's a good guy, he's a good kid, you really ought to give him a try. So on May 19th last year, he signs with the team. In his rookie season, he actually appeared in 11 games. Got a few tackles and some things like that. Did okay, had a fairly decent season. But he's not one of the starters. He's not one of the main guys. And so here comes the Super Bowl. It's halftime. The other team is doing better. The momentum's going their way. We've got to stop this guy. we're going to put Malcolm in there. So they put him in, and right towards the end of the game, if you remember what happens, there's this guy named Jermaine Kearse, and he goes out for this long pass. It's a 33-yard pass, and Butler jumps up, tips the ball. You think, all right. And then the ball lands on Kearse. He's laying on the ground. It bobbles around. He kicks it. And it's just this amazing. He ends up catching the ball, jumping up, and getting ready to run into the end zone. And Butler pushes him down. But he's on the 5-yard line. And they're only behind by a few points. And Malcolm Butler's thinking, I just lost the game for my team. If I'd have just tipped it a little bit harder, if I'd have just got that ball out of there or intercepted it, I would have won the Super Bowl for my team. We're ahead. All we have to do is stop them. But now they're on the 5. So he goes out for a play. They call it a run and play. Deshaun Jackson runs, gets it to the 1-yard line. Everything looks like Seattle's going to win the Super Bowl again. The next play looks like they're lined up for a pass play. They put Malcolm back in. And he's one of those guys that works hard and studies. He had studied the Seahawks. He knew their plays. He knew their lineups. When they line up like this, I know who the quarterback's going to. And he said just for a second, the quarterback glanced at him, and he knew it's coming my way. So the play starts. It's a slant route. Malcolm steps right in front of the guy, grabs the interception, kind of stumbles out of the end zone, gets back, and falls down. Point is, the game goes to the Patriots. And he is the hero of the Super Bowl. A guy who was working at Popeyes not too long before this, who wasn't drafted, who had been cut by a team, didn't really do much in the team when he finally made it, and yet here he is, the hero of the Super Bowl. And they kept sticking microphones in his face, and poor guy, he's first time in his life he's ever been in front of a microphone, I'm sure. He's this real quiet, kind of humble guy, and he couldn't say much. Well, one of the interviewers finally got this out of him. He said this, "You've just got to take advantage of the great things when they come. It's been a long road to get here, some ups and some downs, but I never gave up. I kept pushing and kept believing. I always believed I could play in this league." He said, "It's just confidence, faith, and hard work." When I read that, I'm like, and by the way, Malcolm Butler is a Christian. He's really a fine young man. He's a Christian guy, but he's very humble, very quiet. But I got thinking, isn't that the same thing about Christianity? Living the Christian life, it's confidence, it's faith, and it's hard work. Now, becoming a Christian is easy. You just accept God and receive Him into your life. But living a Christian life is not easy. It's hard. It happens every day. Every day you got to take the day and do what you can with it. That's what he says. It's confidence, it's faith, and it's hard work. There's a popular book by Eugene Peterson that describes discipleship as a long obedience in the same direction. And really that's what the Christian life is like. It's about a long obedience in the same direction. It's about continuing to plug away day after day, week in, week out, and continuing to be faithful, not losing your confidence, but to move forward. Jesus has a parable, and you're figuring, are we ever going to get around to the sermon? Give me time. Jesus has a parable that I think really illustrates this in Matthew 25. Starts in verse 14. It says again, "It will be like a man going on a journey, who calls his servants and entrusts his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more, but the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid the master's money. After a long time," and I think that's critical, long time, "after a long time the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more.' His master replies, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come on and share your master's happiness.' Then the man with 2 bags of gold came. The master said, 'You entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. I have gained 2 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, Good and faithful servant, you have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come, share your master's happiness." Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. He says, "Master, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid. I went out and hid your gold in the ground." And then he comes up with this dirty bag. "See, here is what belongs to you." His master replies, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and I gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money at least on deposit with the bank, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest." You could have done something with the money. "So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has the 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now, I believe this story, I've heard sermons on this passage all my life, and I've heard all kinds of applications of it, but I really think it really boils down to a story about faithfulness. It's not about money, it's not about talents, it's about what we do with what we've got. No matter what that is, how do we handle what we got? Now, in the story, we understand that the analogy of the story is that God is this master who goes and trusts his people with the stuff. And so God comes back and he has 2 types of answers. Well done, good and faithful, thank you. It's about faith, faithful servant. And to the other guy, "You wicked and lazy servant." Now, when we get to face God, whenever that is, which one of those do we want to hear? You know, we hope we don't hear "you wicked and lazy servant," right? You know. So let's talk about what it means to be faithful. How do we live this life in a way that shows faithfulness? See, I believe first, faithfulness is about seeing the opportunity in front of you right now. And when you look at this story at face value, it seems like the master's not a fair man. After all, he gives one guy 5 bags of gold, one guy 2 bags of gold, and one guy 1 bag of gold. And in the story, we understand that that's God, right? God is the master. Are we all together on that part? So answer me this, is God fair? I'm getting some yeses and some nos. I'm going to suggest no, God's not fair. He doesn't have to be fair. He's God. He can do whatever he wants. He could have given them anything he wanted. But from a human standpoint, fairness would be, I'm going to give everybody the same amount. That's human fairness. From a human perspective, God's not fair. He gave them different amounts. He gave some of them more than others. And you look around, and there's some people God's given more to, and you go, "God, that just isn't fair. Why did you give that person more than you gave me? You know, why couldn't I have been the 5-bag guy? I'm the 1-bag guy. She's a 2-bag girl. I'm a 1-bag girl." It just doesn't sound fair. But did you notice what it said in the story? He gave to them according to their capacity. The master knew their capacity to lead. I want to suggest that the 5-bag guy probably started out as a 1-bag guy. But he did something with his 1 bag, and so the next time around he became a 2-bag guy, next time around he became a 5-bag guy. God knows our capacity. And the capacity doesn't have to do with just how he wired us, it has to do with our ability and our obedience to be faithful to him with our capacity. So in this case, the reason one guy got more than another because he was going to do something with it. So we need to see what's in front of us right now. We need to not worry about what the other guy or the other woman has in their hand. We need to not worry about what God's given someone else. The question is, what has God given me? It might be 5 bags, it might be 2 bags, it might be 1 bag. What has he put in my hands? And how do I be faithful with that? Because the response we want to hear is, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The master recognizes faithfulness. You have been faithful with a few things. That's how faith starts, by the way. God doesn't start you out on top. He starts you out with something small, and he sees how you'll handle that. He's not going to give you a bunch until he's given you something to see how you handle it. And if you don't handle that well, you're not going to move on. So you've been given a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. The reward of faithfulness is more capacity. You want to be a five-bagger? Be faithful. That's the way it works. Now, the second thing I'd say about faithfulness is that it focuses on the prize and the process. We've been told all our lives, focus on the prize. Keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on that prize. You know, that's how you get there. But I think that's only half right. I think we need to have one eye on the prize, but we ought to have our other eye on the process that gets there. Because the prize is pretty far away. If the prize is winning the Super Bowl for your team, you know, the odds are kind of against you, okay? It's worse than the lottery. You know, if your prize is to win the lottery, stop spending money, folks. You know, it's a bazillion to one odds that you're going to win the lottery. You know, so the prize is something big, but the process is something small. The process is that thing that God has put in front of you today. And if you do well with this one, then He'll give you something else tomorrow. And if you do well with that, He'll give you something. So the prize is reachable, but only if you follow the process to get there. You know, one of the authors I really like is a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. He's a kind of an odd little character, but he's a really great writer. Writes for the New York Times and has written several bestseller books, The Tipping Point, and things like that. But one of his books is called The Outliers. And it's an interesting book. It talks about, you know, we always see these overnight successes, these people that all of a sudden just instant fame. Of course, these days it's big, you know, when you got America's Got Talent and all those, you know, The Voice and all those shows, you got people who instantly overnight reach fame. And it's easy for us to say, well, that was just so easy for them. But what Malcolm Gladwell says in this, he researched in this book many cases of what we would think were overnight successes. And one of the ones he uses, and apologize to you if you're young people, is the Beatles. You know, it was a rock and roll group back when we were young and way back and a long time ago. You may have heard some of their songs, I don't know. But you older folks, you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, that guy. Thank you. See, this is what I like about HarborPointe. You know, right there. That's what I love about HarborPointe. It's the instant response. I know I'm tracking with somebody. There you go. Thank you. Yeah. So when we were young and we watched that Ed Sullivan show, in this group that we never heard of, the Beatles, you know, they come out on stage and instantly they are a success. It's a great story. But we didn't know the backstory. Before they were instant successes here, back when they were in England, they couldn't hardly get a gig. They went to Hamburg, Germany, which at that time was a nasty place to be. And they had these nasty little clubs there. And for the better part of a year, 7 nights a week, 8 hours a night, the Beatles played these little dives in Hamburg. I mean, just bad little bars. And literally, it was an 8-hour night gig. You started at like 8 in the evening, played like 4 in the morning. Every night, night in, night out, week in, week out. Never got a night off the whole time they were there. What happened is they put in the time. And Malcolm Gladwell suggests that it's 10,000 hours. That if you look across the boards at all these, you know, supposed overnight successes, they put in 10,000 hours of work to get to that place where they're an instant success. So if you're looking for instant success, the prize, you need to look at the process to get there. It doesn't happen without the work. You know, I said this in the earlier service too. You know, you look up there, you look up here at Tom on Sunday morning, you go, I could do that. Yeah, I could be a pastor. That looks pretty easy. Tom's put in the 10,000, folks, at least. He's put in the time. Yeah, it is easy to get up front and talk in front of people, but to pastor, to do what Tom does, it takes some experience. It takes that 10,000 hours. It just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I know he looks like an overnight celebrity, but, you know. But it's a lot of little, being faithful in a lot of little things is what it takes to succeed. Faithful in a little before you're faithful in a lot. Now, here's the thing. This is the hard part. Faithfulness in the little things takes humility. God gave me a lot of things. He didn't give me humility, apparently. This is something we have to work at. You know, most of us aren't graced with humility. Now, that football player, Malcolm Butler, he's a humble guy. You know, if I had just won the Super Bowl for my team, would not be the humble guy. I would grab the microphone from that reporter and I would tell how great I was. You know, he was looking down. He was kind of, oh, gee, I don't know. Humility is what it takes to be faithful. And here's why. Because again, God's not going to start you out on the top. Now, I will talk to young people, okay? The geezer's a thing to talk about, the Beatles. Let me talk to young people. A lot of folks go to college, get out, and they think, okay, someone's going to hire me as the boss of their company because I deserve it. I'm not starting at the bottom. I want to start where my dream is. And I'm around a lot of 20-somethings. And a lot of 20-somethings have this mentality. Now, I do sound like an old geezer, don't I? You know, well, let me tell you. But a lot of 20-somethings, it just happens overnight, and it doesn't. It takes that time. It takes pouring into it, but it takes humility to do it. Because if you're not humble, you won't take that little thing that God gives you and do something with it. If you're humble, you'll take that and you'll make something of it. So the next time, God will give you something a little bit bigger. And if you're humble and you take that and you do the best you can with what God gave you today, that's what faithfulness begins to look like. You know, we all want to be leaders. You know, you go to the bookstores and there's just book after book. There's just shelves full of books on leadership. Almost no books in the bookstore on being a servant, because we don't want to be servants. We want to be the leader. We want to be calling the shots. But Jesus didn't. He said very little about leadership. He said a whole lot about servanthood. Here's what he said. He said, "Whoever wants to become great among you, in other words, whoever wants to be the big shot, must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man," talking about himself, "did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." So Jesus says, you want to be a big shot? Serve. Don't try to lead, just try to serve. He said, look at me. I'm God. I could come and I could throw fire bolts at you, you know. I didn't come doing that. I came serving. And then another place, he says, the greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves, try to be the big shot, will be humbled. But those who humble themselves, in others are the servant, will be exalted. You have to have humility to be faithful. One more thing I believe, faithfulness requires us to conquer fear. Because I think fear is a huge part of it. Remember what the guy said when the boss came to him? You know, the first two guys said, oh, look, boss, I took your money and I doubled it. He comes to the third guy. The first thing he said is, I was afraid. Boss, I'm scared of you. I was afraid. I know you're a tough guy. I was scared. See, I believe the opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith is fear. Because see, as Christians, let me just talk as Christians. If we lack faithfulness as Christians, it's because we're afraid of the outcome of what we do. Why should we be? We follow a great God. Why should we be afraid? That fear is blocking our faith. If we have faith, we'll know that we can do it. God didn't give it to you so you would fail. He gave it to you so you'd succeed and you would grow and you would be stronger. Fear is sometimes the opposite of faith. It's what causes us not to be faithful. And it's irrational. Fear doesn't make any sense. The boss pointed that out. He says, okay, you just said, I'm a tough guy, so you come here with nothing. That's just crazy. That's backwards. So even the boss points out to the third guy, you're being irrational. Fear causes us to be irrational. Because we paint this picture of fear and we let it grow, and we let it get big, and we just get real irrational about it. And then it immobilizes us where we don't move. Fear can immobilize us. That's what the guy did. I couldn't do anything, so I just dug a hole and stuck the money in the hole in the backyard. You know, fear immobilizes us. But fear can be conquered. It's conquered when we do a little, and God allows us to do more. A little story that illustrates this. I don't know if I've ever told you all this story before. I've preached here a couple of times, but I am afraid of heights, and I don't have a problem with that. I'm good with being afraid of heights. It's kept me from falling from tall places. You know, it works well for me. You know, I don't like getting up on the roof. You know, I don't. You know, I grew up in Norfolk. You know, we live at water level. You know, high places are bad for us. You know, so anyway, I've never really been. I've never tried to conquer this fear. Why the heck would you want to conquer this fear? It's a good fear. I embrace my fear. Yeah. So I go on a men's retreat with our church. And one of the activities, supposedly an elective activity, you don't have to do it, is to rappel down this mountainside cliff, way down. And so they had the guys that know what they're doing, the company that comes out and they put the stuff on you and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, I'll take pictures, I'll take pictures of other people coming down this cliff. And I figure, well, there'll be some other guys that don't do it. I won't be the only one that's not going to do it. Everybody does it, and I'm the last guy. And though I am one of the pastors of their church, they start questioning my manhood. You big baby, you chicken, they are calling things into question here. And us guys, we will do stupid stuff to defend our macho. So here I am faced with this dilemma. I'm scared to death of heights. So they get me up there. They put this thing around you that squeezes in places ought not be squeezing, and and so they get me up to the top. I'm gonna have to illustrate. I guess this will be the cliff, and imagine that's about 1,000,000 miles down or something. I don't know. It looked like it. It didn't look that high from the bottom. You get up top. So the guy who works for the company that does this, he's brilliant. He puts me in the harness, puts the rope around me, and so I'm like way back there. Here's the cliff. I'm like 15 feet back there, right, with my back to the cliff. And he says, just lean back. So I lean back. He says, you good? I said, yeah, I can do that. I'm good. He says, okay, take a step back. Lean back again. I lean back. I can do this, okay? I'm not afraid of 3 feet. I'm not afraid of the ground. It's not the ground I'm afraid of. And he just keeps talking to me till I've backed up to the cliff. And I'm right here. I'm not going to, at this point, we have a dilemma, My heart's going ka-chunga, ka-chunga, ka-chunga. I can't breathe, He says, look, here's the thing. He said, right under your left foot, there's a little ledge. He said, all you got to do is just go down and step on that. That's all you got to do. Just lean back and step on that ledge. And I looked down, I went, I can do that, So I leaned back, I stepped on the ledge, and then I just went flying off of it. And it was a blast. I was like one of them seals, man, bouncing off the wall, got the line, gunfire. Well, there wasn't any, but it could have been, A couple things. One, I'll never do it again. I'm not that stupid. I don't want to test my faith that much. But the thing that worked was the step. If that little step hadn't been there, they'd have had to push this boy off that cliff. There's no way. But it was just, if you take one little step, and he started way back, one little step, one little step, one little step, each step gets you closer to where you're going. And that's what faith is like. Faithful in a little. That one little step gets you to the next step. Let me finish with this. There is a reward for being a faithful servant. Okay? When Jesus was getting ready to die, and he'd been hanging out with his guys for a few years, he said something very unique in John chapter 15. He says to his disciples, he says, I no longer call you servants. Now, his whole career had been about calling them servants. It's the 3 years he was with them, servant, you're a servant, you're a servant. He says, I no longer call you servants, Because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I want to call you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I've made known to you. See, that's the goal in being faithful. It's the goal of being a servant. It's the goal of taking a small step and another step and another step, so that one day Jesus looks at you and says, you're no longer just a servant. You're now my friend. Isn't that where we want to be? Let's pray. Lord, forgive us when we're not humble enough to take the small steps. Forgive us when we try to be big shots, when we try to run things, when we try to be someone we're not supposed to be. Lord, teach us to just take the step in front of us. Whether it's 1 bag, 2 bags, or 5 bags shouldn't matter, because you're in the process of shaping our lives, and that's what you're concerned with, is for us to become mature followers of yours, so much so that one day you look us in the eye and say, you're my friend. Lord, we just pray that each one of us this week will not ignore the little steps. Tomorrow morning we wake up, maybe we'll say, God, what is the little step you're putting in front of me today? I can't handle the big stuff, but I can handle the little stuff. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.